Hey everyone, so I'm making this video because the other day I saw a post on the Risk of Rain subreddit that I found pretty interesting. Under the post was a general consensus that content creators complained way too much about the new stuff. So, as a fellow person who makes Risk of Rain content and has also complained a little on the channel,
I'm so worthless!
I wanted to discuss and share my thoughts on the topic. But first, some context. So almost a month ago, the Seekers of the Storm DLC released for Risk of Rain 2 and a lot of people were unhappy with it. And to be fair, the hate was completely warranted. You have game-breaking bugs, random changes to game physics, fundamentally garbage elites, False Sun's laser, increased elite spawn, mostly useless items, a survivor somehow worse than Rex in Eclipse 8? I mean, how is that even possible? Now me, personally, when the DLC first came out, I thought it was aight. Maybe like 5 out of 10 if we ignore the bugs. I'd say people's first initial impressions of it before the bug fixes were a bit too much though. Like, no Mr. Pyrocynical, the game isn't dead. Far from it, actually. I can't speak for other platforms, but on Steam at least, the player base quite literally peaked at an all-time high. Even now, there's still a few more people playing than right before the DLC dropped. I don't know, I just found it pretty odd how people just assumed the game was dead and beyond repair. Like, yeah, the bugs were pretty huge, game-breaking even, invincible mythics, FPS-related physics, the title screen being all you can access on Xbox. You've probably heard about it all by now. It was a disaster, to say the least. But it was far from unfixable, and Gearbox clearly showed that much with the patch they released like a week later. But despite all that, people still don't really love the DLC, myself included, and that's totally fair. Even with the bug fixes, everything else I've mentioned still stands. In fact, there are so many popular mods recently that are out right now that try and rectify all the issues I mentioned earlier. There's mods that remove twisted elites, reworks war bonds, reworks chef, fixes game physics, fixes the director, etc. And real quick before I continue, big shoutouts to all the modders. You guys are miracle workers. I don't know what this community has done to deserve you guys. Now back to what I was saying. Yeah, the DLC as of today is still pretty mid. There's still a lot of things that need fixing. Now it is worth noting though that Gearbox is aware of the state of the game and do plan to address it. And seeing the track record with how fast they've patched out stuff, I'm feeling a bit optimistic. But as of right now specifically, the DLC is not in the best shape. And all of the big content creators for Risk of Rain 2 have certainly made everyone aware of that, with some maybe doing so a bit more outlandishly than others. And people are starting to get tired of it. But real quick, before I talk about these creators, obviously don't harass anyone I show in this video or go to their channels and call them idiots or big dumb poo-poo heads. There's already been enough negativity going around in this community lately and I'm not really about it. Okay, that's all. So Disputed Origins reaction I feel is pretty standard. Gave the DLC a fair shot, wasn't a fan, shitted on it, just went about his day. And I mean, yeah, fair enough. Nothing he's complained about is invalid at all. Race is more or less in the same boat, except he downpatched his game as well, which, I mean, is totally cool. I'm an advocate for people playing the game in the way they prefer because at the end of the day, it's PvE. Nobody should really care about how other people play the game. I personally play Eclipse 8 without Lunars or Void Fields. Others play Monsoon with Command and Sacrifice. Both are equally viable ways to play the game, so long as you're having fun. It's the same scenario here. Race has more fun downpatching the game, and encourages others to do so if they dislike the current patch for the same reason he does. Some other people claim that he whines too much, which is fair. Personally, I found him renaming items to downpatch your game hilarious, but I also get why people would be annoyed by that, especially with this current swirl of negativity. But you gotta remember, big streamers like Race are like in the top 0.01% of players in the game. It's literally his job to play the game. So of course he's going to notice and complain about the many negative changes that were made, even if only a small portion of players will ever care about or even experience some of them, which I also think is fair. R&D Thursday, now that guy's just vibing. Like, I thought I was a pretty optimistic person, but holy hell. yeah, as of currently, he's just exploring the DLC, trying out some wacky item interactions and whatnot. I do have a problem with one thing he said though. Seeker in S tier? Are you serious? What are you talking about, bro? There's no way she's that good. Raidens, love that guy. The only streamer I ever really watch when he's live sometimes, and that's coming from a guy who doesn't really watch streams that often. Pretty chill dude. Anyways, he's in a similar boat as Disputed and Race, not really a fan of the DLC at all. He kinda complained a lot though, not gonna lie. And other people are saying this about him as well. But me, I'm saying this more so out of lightheartedness rather than annoyance. In fact, it's become a bit of a joke in his server about people complaining about him complaining. And I mean, I get it. Some of the bugs suck, a lot of the items suck, the director sucks, the physics sucks. But complaining about the resurrection shrine costing 3 chests worth of credits out of everything as well? I mean, come on, man. But once again, for the same reasons Race, I get it. His complaints, although maybe a little too excessive at times, they're mostly completely valid and true, sadly. Limelight, kind of in the same boat as R&D Thursday, just vibing, checking out goofy interactions. Stocks needs help, also not the biggest fan of the DLC, but get this. Instead of being a negative Nancy, they instead recommend community fixes for the DLC and shed more light on the positive stuff the DLC had. Wooly, on the other hand, seriously hates this DLC. As of this recording, he's currently doing streams where he unlocks the Prime Meridian skins for all the survivors, which means you have to beat False Sun with all of them. And in the streams, you have your typical blah blah blah, devs fundamentally don't understand the blah blah blah. And I mean, yeah, fair enough. Adding several items that reward you for getting hit, and bear in mind these rewards are not even good at all. Adding those in a game where you want to be hit as little as possible is pretty questionable. I kinda see where Wooly is coming from here. But Wooly also kinda goes too far sometimes. In this clip here, he dies to False Sun's laser. Pretty par for the course in this DLC, unfortunately. Being able to run that fast and also slam during the laser when it does that much damage, it's complete bullshit. But anyways, side tangent aside, the section in the VOD is muted now, but he goes on this rant afterwards calling Gearbox devs idiots and another word that I think you can deduce based off these chat messages. I mean, dude, come on. I know it's your birthday, but you can't just say whatever you want, man. Jokes aside, I'm not really gonna talk much about him calling them retards. If Wooly is watching this, he probably also knows that he shouldn't be saying that, especially with an audience of his size. I do, however, want to pivot this conversation towards the Gearbox devs themselves. I'm assuming what I'm about to say is sort of already implied by Wooly's little rant, but I still want to make the distinction clear just in case. I think saying that Gearbox devs are incompetent and don't care about the game at all is ridiculous. Specifically for the people that worked on the game, like the artists, people who used to reach out to the community, more on that later, lore masters, programmers, etc. Although a lot of things in the DLC are lackluster, they've absolutely cooked in some departments. The stage designs are so good and clearly show the people who drafted them understand this game and its story elements on a deeper level. From a gameplay standpoint, they can be traversed pretty nicely without having to go out of your way for some loot. Looking at you, Sundered. And from a story standpoint, you get Providence's feet here, and then his torso here, and then his head on Prime Meridian. Then you fight False Sun on his hand. Bro, that's sick as hell. Genuinely, I would go there more if the stage 3 bosses were changed and the False Sun fight was rebalanced. I'd say the concept and execution for the Path of Colossus and the False Sun fight, except for the laser, were also genuinely good additions to the game. To me at least, it seems very clear that they're trying their best here and that they care for the game. The higher-ups at Gearbox and Take-Two on the other hand, yeah, they suck, because these guys clearly do not care at all for their games. Not sure if you guys remember this, but the moment Gearbox acquired the Risk of Rain franchise, they decided to make a shitty, predatory, gacha mobile game? What? Yeah, no. This DLC obviously needed more time in the oven, but for some reason they just tolerated it and released it prematurely. And yes, this is an actual tweet from the CEO of Gearbox, which I'm sure so many of you guys watching have already seen, unfortunately. And remember how I mentioned people who reached out to the community earlier in this video? Yeah, that entire team of people who interacted with known content creators for some feedback, those guys were just laid off. It's just sad, man. Sorry, didn't mean to be so negative, but I felt the distinction was pretty important to make. Anyways, here's my overall thoughts and takeaways on Risk of Rain 2 content creators doing too much. First of all, I think it's completely fair to complain about the DLC, especially in its current state. In some of my videos, I quite literally crack jokes with my friend about how Knockback Finn is just so goated. But at the same time, it must be really exhausting as a viewer, constantly seeing all this negativity in a large majority of Risk of Rain 2 videos lately, and I think people are right to be annoyed by it. And of course, this isn't coming from a place of malice or hatred. The only reason these content creators are complaining as much as they do is because they love the game just as much as we do. Of course, it would be ideal if creators complain less and just had some fun with it, but at the same time, I can't really in good faith blame them at all for complaining in the first place. Second of all, this should be obvious, nobody should insult the devs. The people who worked on the game, and I specify that for a reason, probably care for the game and are doing their best. People these days are way too comfortable dehumanizing devs and blaming them for everything bad that happens in the game. Like, dude, at the end of the day, they're people just like us. Relax, man. But otherwise, fuck Randy Pitchford. And the last point that I want to make is... Seeker in S tier, are you serious? What the fuck?